Welcome to Workshop Wednesday. Today I'm going to show you how to disassemble some clubs. So over here I have a brand new driver. I'm going to teach you how to, or show you rather, how to remove a graphite shaft from this head. We then have 3 wedges. The first wedge, I'm going to show you how to remove a steel shaft one particular way. I then have an identical wedge where I'll show you another technique. And finally, another wedge with a graphite shaft. Now we do very slightly different things just to protect the hosel and the shaft coming out of it, especially if it's graphite and you want to reuse it. So let's start with the first club. It's a driver. It's always best to remove the shaft and sleeve where you can. If you can avoid putting any heat on the head where possible, that's always best. So let me just unscrew this driver head. Remember, if you're doing a reshaft and the shaft is in a particular hosel setting, do take note of the sleeve setting before you take the head out, because you may not necessarily remember where it's going back in. So, head to one side. Tom, if you want to come in and have a look. So, we need to apply heat to the sleeve. Essentially, well, the vast majority of clubs are just held on with epoxy or adhesive, so we need to warm the sleeve up to break the bond and then pull the sleeve off. So we use this particular shaft extraction device. There are many available. This is just based on hydraulic force. So shaft will go into the machine like this. We use this collar just so the mouth parts of the shaft puller, or pusher rather, don't damage the sleeve. This just reduces it down to a point where you're just pushing the sleeve off like so. Okay, so there are 2 methods of applying heat. You can either use a heat gun or a blowtorch. Experience will tell you what to use. Where you can use a blowtorch, obviously it's quicker, but you can start to burn and brown, especially sort of black finishes. So in this instance, I'm going to be using a heat gun. Nothing special about this heat gun, it's just a decorator's heat gun. So I'm going to go max heat, apply heat to the sleeve, and slowly, ever so slowly, apply pressure to the sleeve. And once the bond breaks, it suddenly releases, at which point you can take the heat off and push the sleeve off. And it will be very hot, so be very, very careful. Set that down aside. You can leave that to cool, pop it back in to the club head in the right sleeve setting, screw the sleeve back in, and then you can clean the hosel with a wire brush just to remove any dried epoxy. Okay, that's that club done. If you were actually going to be reusing this shaft, you can see on the tip of the shaft there's dried epoxy. I would always advocate using a fresh blade and just scratch down towards the tip of the shaft all the way around until you've removed all the epoxy. Just note, if this shaft is going into another head, you won't be able to install it unless you drill the adhesive or epoxy out of the shaft. That's the only way that air can escape once you insert the shaft back into the sleeve. If you don't do it, basically the shaft will bounce and it's just going to be impossible to get the shaft back in. So if the shaft is going back into another head, do drill it out first to allow air to escape. Okay, moving on to the next club. Wedge with a steel shaft. There are instances where you can just remove the head with manpower, so to speak. Never do it with graphite. You will bust the tip of the graphite. Again, experience will tell you, I mean, I've worked with clubs and different adhesives for over 20 years, so I know which heads are easier to remove than others. This particular head, I can use a burner And again, I'm just going to apply heat to nothing but that. Before I mention that, I was going to say, if you're going to be reusing the shaft, use a heat gun to warm the ferrule up. Just a little bit. Just remembering to keep the heat just on the ferrule itself. Then you can take a clean blade, always cutting away from you, and just cut down. And then what you can find is you can just take the blade and the ferrule comes off easily. So, back to where we were. Torch on, applying heat to nothing but the hosel. If you see any discoloration at all, you've heated it too much. And from your chemistry experiments, just remember that the end of the blue flame is the hottest part, and then literally the shaft just comes out like this. Shaft could be set aside, and then you can use a 9.1 millimeter drill bit for taper hosels to remove any debris, and then a wire hosel cleaning brush again. Okay. The next method, and I would say the safest method if you're unsure, is to use the shaft extractor. Again, we're just going to heat the ferrule up. Taking a fresh blade. Okay, and now that means basically we're not having to push through the ferrule to get the head off, because when the head's hot, if you try to push through the ferrule, you'll end up pushing molten plastic onto the outside of the hosel, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to clean. So again, I'm using my little collar here, clamping down on the shaft, applying a little bit of pressure to begin with, and I'll use the torch this time, so you can just see how much longer it takes to use a torch. Once the bond goes, which is gone there, you can turn the heat off and just drive the head off. Again, 9.1 millimeter drill bit, wire hosel cleaning brush. Okay, finally is the graphite shaft. Again, these have been 3 identical wedges. I'm going to do the same thing here. Even more important to keep the heat source away from the graphite. You just want to apply a little bit of heat. Tom, I knew I wasn't going to do this in one take. I just needed to get some pliers. Where are they gone? Okay, so instead of cutting this off, I'm just going to apply a little bit more heat. I'm just going to pinch this ferrule off. The problem with using a blade removing a ferrule on the graphite shaft, I mean, I'm discarding this shaft. You can go into the ferrule, and you can end up damaging the shaft itself. Tom, can you zoom in and see that? You want to avoid that at all costs. Okay, so now we've removed the ferrule. Same technique, into the shaft extractor, using our little collar. And this time I'll use the gas torch. Again, just gently waving the flame over 1.25 inches from the top of the hosel where the shaft is seated. A bit of pressure and the head comes off. Okay, again clean with a drill bit and a wire hosel cleaning brush. And lastly, I just wanted to show you the old acrylic ferrules. Anybody that's tried to remove shafts over the last 20-30 years will know when they've found an acrylic ferrule. I am going to heat the ferrule up. And everyone who's tried this will never forget their first acrylic ferrule. And off it goes. Fortunately, that one stopped. Otherwise, it can just carry on going until they burn out. So yeah, acrylic ferrules, keep an eye out. Otherwise, you fill your garage up with smoke. So that was 4 methods to remove shafts. I hope you liked it. And stay tuned for next Workshop Wednesday. Thank you.